I lean into like existentialism, which is like this expansiveness of how do we create meaning and purpose. This coffee cup here, right? We can view it as a coffee cup. We can view it as a vessel to hold life. What? We can view it as, a fucking weapon if we wanted to. The coffee cup has never actually changed, but the meaning that we've attached to it changed everything about it. Because life's real hard, especially now. Like, life's really fucking hard. Mm-hmm. We have to experience the fear and the anxiety, the dread, to experience love, connection, joy. Like, nothing changes if nothing changes, which is pretty simple on the surface level, but if once you dig into it, it's really fucking profound. So just take 10 deep breaths, Joe. Think you're on a beach. I was like, what the fuck? What is this? Yeah. And for years I was like, breathwork sucks. And then I engaged in it in a way with someone who was like trained in it. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit. Yeah. Right? If you can regulate the body, you can regulate the mind. Thoughts of suicide ideation. And it was scary. I was not fully in my life. I had one foot in, one foot out. This preciousness of life exists now. So how do I want to play this? How do I want to engage in this? Sit in there with like curiosity, because if we can be curious, compassion can follow pretty quickly. Now, usually join together. We have to reacquaint ourselves with why, because why is expansive. Why is pretty much everything.
Welcome back, Wellness Ninjas, to another episode of the Wellness Dojo Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Craig, and I'm excited today to have another special guest. Today we have a local therapist working out of Carbon Psychology. Welcome to the show, Joe Seddon.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're going to have a good conversation, and this is your first podcast you've ever done. Is that correct?
First podcast.
I love it. I love it. I love being people's first.
I know, man. Let's get weird.
Let's get weird. Let's get into it. Awesome. So, first of all, before we do anything else, I'm going to give you the floor to kind of introduce yourself a little bit and a little bit about your background too.
Okay. Who's Joe? That's one of those like expansive questions.
Yes.
Quick answer is, I'm a therapist in Calgary. Born and raised in Yorkshire in England. Been in Canada 10 years now. Prior to that, just dotted around, traveled around a lot, spent some time in the States, Australia, Sri Lanka, just getting into all sorts of mischief, doing some really fun work over there. And for the last 10 years, working in Calgary, in different areas, like some non-profits, some agency work, and in the last 2 years, being up in private practice.
I love it. So you say you've traveled a ton.
Yeah,
I imagine lots of life experience through that.
Yeah, I would say I've experienced some life. I've been really fortunate to have those opportunities. I know many don't, and so it's always important to acknowledge like the privilege that I have to have these experiences, to travel into all these places. And it's definitely shaped who I am today. Yeah. And in my work, I show up as Joe. I don't like being, put my therapist hat on. Like I'll wear this into session. I'll just try and be as real as possible.
Yeah. That's one thing that I love about you. Like even from the first time that we met, I think I even said that to you. I was like, I just love how you're just like, you're so yourself. And that's something that I want to get into a little bit today too. Like that kind of finding that kind of like self, that like, who am I kind of question. But before we get too deep into that, I do want to hear a little bit more about how you got into what you got into, but I want to ask you a couple meaningful life questions. This is like my icebreaker for the day, okay?
Okay.
So I wrote down here a couple meaningful questions.
Right.
So these are big life questions, but you only get to answer with one word for each question.
Right, sure, okay.
Okay,
let's do it.
Are you up for the challenge?
I'm up for the challenge, mate.
Okay, so the first one. You've got 1 year to live. How do you spend it? You only have 1 year left. How do you spend it?
Traveling.
I like it. See, I thought you were going to go a different direction, but that's good. I like that.
What direction do you think I was going?
I thought you were just going to take like the easy route and just say living. It's like so many meanings to that.
I know, right?
Yeah. Okay, next question. How do we save the world?
That's hard with one word. I'm gonna say 2. Just less idiots.
Less idiots, all of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Okay, I'll let that slide. Okay, this is a tough one. What pain can you live with?
All of it.
All right. That feels a little bit like a cop-out. I'm just kidding. Okay, this is the last one, and we're going to circle back to these later.
Yeah.
I'll give you a real chance to answer these later. But what is the meaning of life?
Engagement.
Engagement. I like that. I like that. See, folks, buckle up. It's going to be a good episode. All right. So with all that being said, let's get into just I'm curious. Anytime I have anybody on the show, therapist, coach, artist, whatever it is, I always like to kind of find out a little bit more about like what pulled you towards this career path, and obviously wanting to help people, but a little bit just about like your history and what got you into therapy.
I've been in this field my entire career. I'm 34 now. I started at 15 years old. I started volunteering at a children's charity, and then 18, I went to Sri Lanka after I'd finished high school. I did the whole like white savior thing and worked in an orphanage, which now I kind of look back and go, shit, that's a little unsettling, but it was a profound experience. And then went to university, did my undergrad in the UK in counselling psych, then spent a couple of summers and years in the American summer camps working with individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities and at-risk youth. And then, moved to Canada and jumped into agency work. So I was working with individuals with like dual diagnosis and complex needs. So like a disability and a mental health diagnosis, and opened up and like managed group homes. So it was like the rehabilitation from say like psychiatric units, prisons into like the community setting. Did that for 5 years at the first one, and then did about 9-10 months in children's services, which is a beast of a system, broken system. And then back into the non-profit like group home environments for another couple of years. During that time, I did my master's in counselling psych, and then after that, went into private. So my entire career has been in mental health, and I'm one of those lucky people who just figured out the passion early on and has just ridden that wave. So really grateful for the opportunities that has been bestowed upon me to explore this field, from the front lines now into the really privileged position of being like a therapist in private practice. So it's been expansive. And you have a great team right now that you work around too. I've met some of them, and I kind of visited the location there too at Carbon, and it's just a really cool environment. The people and the colleagues are especially humans, and having that team around you is so important, because private practice can be a really lonely existence. You can be one-on-one with the clients, and sometimes you hear like really horrific shit, and then I can't go out and then speak to friends, family about it because confidentiality. But so you have that those people in your corner just to kind of go sit in their office on their couch and just be, right? And just and they kind of relate, and they know, and they don't have to understand, they don't have to dig into any of the like the context of it, but they just hold that space to like we see you. Right?
And you know that they're kind of like also experiencing the same thing, which helps a bit. Right?
It's great.
So like going into like youth homes and rehabilitation stuff, like that's got to be some really heavy shit, like you said, at certain times. Is there like, were you pulled towards that in particular, or did you just kind of land yourself there?
I've always enjoyed working with individuals with like developmental disabilities. I've done that for the majority of my career, and because they're such a underserved population, like massively marginalized, and for me as a white Englishman, I have had probably one of the easiest lives, right? Just by virtue of my skin color. Like grew up in the middle class when it existed still, so I have this sense of duty that because I can somehow like wander through life okay and independently, I have a duty to kind of serve others. And that's been like my philosophy since day one, essentially. And that keeps me on the straight and narrow in the field. And on those difficult days, like it's something to anchor back to.
Yeah. I like it. How would you describe your style of therapy? Because I know like I think when people, especially people who haven't been to therapy before, right? When you kind of said like, you alluded to it a little bit at the beginning, even just like the way you dress, that type of stuff. What's your therapy style? How would you describe that?
I don't want to say chaotic. It's curious. I always say I'm a curious therapist first and a nice one second. I think I'm a nice guy, but like curiosity like drives my work. I don't have like a specific approach I use. So I'm like a CBT therapist, a DBT therapist. I lean into like existentialism, which is like this expansiveness of how do we create meaning and purpose. And when I'm working with someone, I always say there's two experts in the room, right? So you'll be the expert of your own life, your own reality, because you live it. And I've got some pieces of paper on the wall saying I know my shit as well. So I like to co-create meaning with my clients. And to me, the relationship is the most important thing in therapy. Like if the relationship is not there, you can't do any work. So I would say my approach is a relational one. Yeah.
I like that. I like curiosity, and I think it's really important. I've talked about this with people on the show before too, but I don't think it can be talked about enough with the relationship in terms of therapy, because I think people view it, especially people who haven't done it before or for like an extended period of time. I know when I first went into it, like it was clinical in my mind. Like I went into it and I'm like, this is clinical. Like it's like going to the doctor. They're going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do it and things are going to get better. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's very much, it's almost weird in a sense because it's like a friendship. Yeah. But at the same time, it's not because it can't be. Right. Yeah. But that's really cool. And I want to get into what you mentioned, like this kind of, you search for meaning, like you help people like find the meaning in things. What is meaning?
Meaning, it's a big question, that. Meaning can be pretty much anything, right? It's what we attribute ourselves to, like how we look at something can be meaningful. So for instance, this coffee cup here, right? We can view it as a coffee cup. We can view it as a vessel to hold life, water. We can view it as, a fucking weapon if we wanted to. The coffee cup has never actually changed, but the meaning that we've attached to it changed everything about it. And so meaning is this expansiveness. Meaning creates space for us to look at life from different perspectives and in different ways. Because life's real hard, especially now. Like life's really fucking hard. And so to create that space to look at a situation, a relationship, an object, areas, domains of our life where we might feel stuck, to create that space and look at it through a different lens, we can work to attach a different meaning to it, which then can be transformative. Yeah.
The word that keeps coming into my mind is like perspective too. Oh yeah. Right. Like meaning is your perspective of that situation or that specific thing, like the coffee cup.
Yeah. Perspective is huge. Yeah. And perspective can be malleable, right? It doesn't have to be this like rigid thing, right? Because once it's malleable, we can actually do something with it. We can change it. We can look at it from different angles, top down, left, right.
Yeah. Correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think people can get really easily stuck in like trying to find like that one meaning for things. Yeah. Right? Do you notice that with people that are coming in as well?
I think I notice in everyone, even in myself, right? We're in constant change. So something that I've attributed one certain meaning to, say last year, could have a completely different meaning to it now, just based on where I am and like the changes I have undergone. So yeah, the stuckness is is definitely like present a lot of the time, but it's knowing that we can get unstuck, which can be daunting, because especially if it's been maintained for years and years and years, it's scary, right? It's going to cause anxiety to say, okay, are we going to look at this thing a different way? But then that's where like I think therapy can be really, really helpful, is just change. Yeah,
and I think it lends like that other lens, right? It's not just, it kind of forces you to pull out a little bit, and you have somebody else as well, even if it was just a friend, but somebody who's trained to like kind of guide you in that right way, to be able to say, what if it means something different, or what else could this mean, is a big question that I ask myself a lot when I'm stuck.
Yeah, right. And it's I think like therapy offers this non-judgmental like perspective. My job is to be helpful. I'm not here to judge anyone, and I try and like suspend judgment as much as possible, because that's just not helpful. I don't think people want to come into therapy and leave a session feeling like they were judged by the therapist. But also, I don't have a right to judge them. I have no idea what their life is like outside of the therapy room. Like, I don't follow them around. So who am I to say that what their meaning is or what their perspective is right or wrong? It's to get curious, right? That's how we explore it. Right? And we could explore different perspectives, different potential meanings, but it's fundamentally down to the individual to choose if they want to engage in that and look at it from that perspective. And if they don't, that's fine as well.
Yeah, it's like any change. It's very cliche, but it's like you have to be willing to change before you can make that change. So even somebody who's trying to quit smoking or alcohol or something like that, right? It almost sounds like unfair to say it, but it's like it changes in an instant. Like it's in that like decision of like, I'm going to see this differently. I'm not going to view this as, again, just going back to maybe smoking. This doesn't have control over me anymore. I have control over it. Even just a simple perspective change like that can be powerful, right?
For sure, yeah. And there's this Buddhist saying which I often like drop in sessions, which is nothing changes if nothing changes, which is pretty simple on the surface level, but if once you dig into it, it's really fucking profound. About if nothing changes, then nothing will change. I mean, we have fundamental control to make that change, and inaction is a choice of change. We're choosing not to change if we're engaging in action, and that's really simplifying it, because there's so many other stuff that can compound on top of it that makes it difficult to change. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the most important things. I think willingness as well. Like you have to be willing to change, and understanding that with change inevitably comes like fear, anxiety, and unfortunately, we have to experience those emotions. We have to experience them all, right? We have to experience the fear and the anxiety, the dread, to experience love, connection, joy. Like we can't pick and choose which ones we want to experience. Like we have them all. Yeah,
and that's kind of goes back to that one question that I asked you at the beginning, was what pain are you willing to live with, right? And it all comes from the idea that you can't have love without pain. You can't have success without sacrifice. Like there's always both sides. It kind of reminds me of like the yin yang a little bit of like there's always, it's a balance, and they have to intertwine and kind of mesh with each other. But you have to be, like you said, willing to go through that to make that change happen, right?
Yeah, and it's hard, right? I'll always say to my clients, like, therapy is really fucking hard at times. But I walk alongside my clients. It's an honor to bear witness to their journey. And there's times where I have to maybe hold a little bit more space as we dive into some of the deeper waters. But we always come back to shore at the end of the session. Like, we don't just leave people like treading water or drowning, because it's kind of unethical to do that.
Yeah. When you say hold more space, for people who maybe haven't been to therapy before, like what do you mean by that?
That can mean a lot of things. Sometimes it's just like sitting in the shit with them, right? And just being a presence, just being there, and sometimes you don't have to say anything at all.
Yeah.
It's just being with them, and knowing that it's okay. Whatever their experience is valid. It's right because it's existing, and just be there with the other person as they're experiencing whatever they are. Like is really holding that space.
Yeah. You mentioned before too that there's a lot of things that can really like weigh down on a person that can kind of like have them feeling stuck. It's like, I think even in my experience in life, there's been a lot of times where I've felt very stuck, and I know I should be looking at it differently, and I know I should try and like see that perspective differently, but there's just like something that's holding me away from it, from being ready, I guess, to make that perspective switch, or to try and find that meaning. What do you think are some of the things that really kind of hold people down from that? A big one that pops into my mind is values.
Values,
right? Like just like values and beliefs.
Yeah,
like the kind of systems. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, of course, yeah. Values is huge. In the early stages of the work I do with my clients, we always explore, what are your values? And that question's thrown out like all the time.
Yeah.
But like to sit in it is a really difficult thing. It's like, what do I value? What do I align myself with? Because that's what makes us.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to values, I think understanding what the core individual values of the self is critically important, because we are constantly have like values and systems like imposed on us, right? Whether it's like family values, societal values, like religious values, all of that shit is just externally imposed values, and we might align with some of them. That's great, but there's some that we might not. But if we are constantly told that we have to live within this set like system of values, we then usually have to like contort our bodies to fit within that. And when we contort our bodies, like there's never enough room, right? So we're all somewhere like, kind of like this in this box, and that's where pain comes from a lot of the time. And that sense of like misalignment can happen, and so misalignment is really, really, really difficult, because it's like on the internal self, right? When we know we're kind of misaligned from our core values, or where we want to be, or who we want to be, no matter what we kind of pack on top of it, like through distractions or kind of like repression, if we are misaligned, it will constantly just fucking scream inside of us, and we'll just know it, we'll feel it, we'll hear it. So to understand what your unique values are to you is the first step towards that sense of like alignment and attunement, right? Which is one of the most important things for me in therapy, is are we aligned?
Yeah, and you're right. It's almost like, I don't even know how to say it, but it's this weird thing that it seems so obvious, or it's like almost like such a thing that we've like overgeneralized in society too. Is like, what are your values? Like, what are your core values? Especially in coaching, like this is always like the go-to. It's like, well, what are your core values? Do they align to how you're living your life and stuff? But there's so much more to it. And there's like you said, there's these societal pressures. There's values that have been passed down that, maybe you're feeling like anxious when you're around your family and stuff, and that might tell you something, right? But it's easy to just be like, no, this is how it's like, I'm supposed to be XYZ.
Yeah,
right. It's and I think that a lot of times anxiety and even like depression, that type of thing, like I always think of it as like, what's my purpose, and like am I living in alignment to my purpose? And then that purpose kind of ties into all those values and beliefs that I have, which are constantly changing in my life. Yeah,
all right. And values, we are constantly like renegotiating the self, right? We're in constant flux and change, and like we said, our values can shift, and again, it goes back to being malleable. Like our valuables need to be somewhat malleable, right? Because if they're too rigid, any sort of unanticipated like event that comes in can shatter them, or they can be like too fluid, and it's like sand running through your hands. So it's have you ever seen like toffee being made?
Yeah.
Right. Like it's like a solid structure, but you can move it, right? And so that's that.
It's like glass blowing too.
Yeah. It's like that malleability of, okay, so even though they're still my values, I can move within them.
Yeah.
As opposed to I just have to like have this like really set rigid framework.
Yeah.
Because like the set rigid framework is usually those like societal pressures, like the family ones, like and all that other stuff that is really kind of imposed on us and like makes us like have to redact ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a tricky, like, that's a difficult thing. It's not tricky. Like, it's just straight up, like, it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
When your values are starting to change.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, there's a lot of different things that can impact it. Like, the same way that we have these values that we're kind of taught. Or we're, like, domesticated early on in life, right? And we're taught these beliefs, these values and stuff. And it's just, for the majority of our life, that's just what we're taught. And so that just becomes the norm. Well, when you grow up and maybe you find yourself with a new partner who had a different family with different values, or you start a new job that's, has coworkers around you that also have different values. Now, like, you're starting to get all this perspective changing. Meaning is starting to kind of transform a little bit in your eyes. You're starting to see that, like, oh, this person who has a different value is actually a good person. Maybe that value, maybe that meaning that they have isn't so bad. Maybe I should try that out. Like, right? Yeah. It's a really interesting thing, but it's difficult because then all of a sudden you do feel misaligned just by opening your mind up a little bit.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important questions we have to ask ourselves is why, right? Because why gets like drilled out of us at an early age, right? Remember being a kid and you're like, why this? Why are we doing this way? And the parents are just like, fucking,
can I have this?
tired.
No. Why?
But why?
Yeah, I hear it on a daily basis. Trust me.
And it's just because, right?
Because I said so.
And even now, like functioning adults to a certain degree, when we ask like why, like say in work or in like a relationship, why can be seen as almost an attack, and you can see people get quite defensive when why is asked. But the why is the curious. Right, so engage. Like we have to reacquaint ourselves with why, because why is expansive. Why is pretty much everything, right? Because why am I engaged in this pattern? Why am I maintaining it? Because all of a sudden, then we're in a place of like introspection and reflection, right? And then why do I keep doing it? Right, that's a big one.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, right, the why creates this landscape of exploration.
Yeah. Yeah, it like opens a door in a sense, right? Yeah, because the other thing too, I've found this with myself, is I have to be very careful not to just ask why, because my brain will just find the easiest answer. Why didn't this work? Because you're an idiot. It's like, well, no, I got to challenge that answer a little bit too, and also I've really recognized, in something I've like worked with my clients with too, even with nutrition, something as simple as just like eating the right foods. Simple. I say that. But it's like it's not just about asking the question of like, why do I eat this food, but it's like it's almost guiding your subconscious mind to a more productive answer. Like, not why do I eat this food? Well, because you're lazy and you don't want to cook. That's the first answer that comes to mind. But maybe if you ask yourself something different, like why do I struggle to get more vegetables on my plate? Like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's like a better answer that I can find with that. Yeah.
And usually those whys, like, so we ask ourselves why, and then we go into that kind of like we start shitting on ourselves. I'd always ask, whose voice is that? Because hopefully that we shouldn't be talking shit about ourselves, right? We want to be showing ourselves like compassion. But asking whose voice is that, again, it slows everything down. Like, is that an externally imposed narrative that's been put upon me? Because if it is, that's not yours. Right. And a lot of the time, right, through like working with trauma, and just a lot of like the societal pressures, it's often not our voice. It can be like a parent, like a teacher, or it could be like a societal narrative that's been imposed on us, that's saying that we're lazy or that we're shit, because we're not. We know that's untrue. Because fundamentally you're not a shit person. Right? We can do shitty things, but you're not a shit person.
It's super interesting. And it's like trauma is an interesting one too, in terms of trying to find meaning. Right, like that's a tough one, especially if you've been hurt, or if you've just experienced just life traumas that just don't make sense to you, right? It's really hard to sit with that and be like, well, why did this happen to me? And like, I'm curious, I guess, I'm not really sure where I was going with that question, but I guess I'm curious, like, how does somebody kind of transform that into meaning? Like, whether it's a trauma that they did, like that they put onto somebody, or a trauma that they've experienced from somebody. Either way, we got to try and find meaning in every experience, right?
Yeah. I'd always say that you are not your trauma. Like, trauma happened to you. And the trauma it's awful, right? It's horrible, like, when we have to endure it and when we experience it, because it's subjective as well. Like, it's I mean, there's all this kind of like, you follow these steps and there's a pathway to healing, but healing from trauma is a subjective experience. It takes time, right? It takes safety, security, trust. And that's really hard, right? Especially if we're being traumatized, to, first of all, feel safe within ourselves, within our own bodies. That's huge. And often we hear, like, go to a yoga class and say, okay, everyone, let's turn inward and be within the body. But if the body is unsafe, that's a really, really fucking hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So, like, reacquainting ourselves with our own body is a huge part of, like, healing work. And learning that people can be safe again. It's just huge, because trauma is isolating.
Yeah.
And so many times, especially with, like, sexual abuse, people are locked away and won't disclose it for years, out of fear of not being believed, or like like, people coming after them, like the person who perpetrated the trauma. And yeah, like, and to share that is, like, to be, like, incredibly vulnerable. And then if that's met with something that's not helpful, the body's and the brain's like, fuck that. Like,
never doing this again.
Never doing that again. So yeah, like, safety, trust within others and within ourselves. And also knowing that, like, everyone is worthy of healing. Like, everyone has the right to heal. Even if they've committed acts that have left someone traumatized, they are still worthy of healing. And that's can be a hot debate, especially around, say, some crimes that are committed. But I mean, everyone has the right to heal in some capacity.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing.
Right?
Yeah. You mentioned when you were talking about that, is like going inward and the difficulty with that. Like, everybody, like, I think everybody has some degree of trauma that we're living with, whether it's our own trauma or whether it's trauma that, we don't even maybe know that we have. But when people are going inward like that and they're trying to, I mean, I guess first of all, let's talk about, like, what does that mean to go inward?
To go inward, yeah. That's for me, to go inward is to be present, right? To just be in this moment. And to turn inward is to experience the body. And again, that's really hard. We live in a society where we are constantly pulled into the past and the future and out of the present moment. So to turn inward, like, if we haven't been taught how to do it, because we don't get taught how to turn inward in school. We get taught fucking Pythagoras' theorem. Never use that. So it's a journey, like, to go, like, to turn inward and, like, reestablish a relationship with the body and the self. It can be really overwhelming at times, like, just to say, go and feel your emotions. If we don't know what the emotions are, or we've never done it before, that's so overwhelming. We get flooded, and then we're like, fuck that, I'm not doing that again. So I think it's, like, to be curious again, like curiosity is key, and, like, incrementally going inward, right? So you are having this relationship with the body and the emotions that exist within them. And if it's too much, we just kind of take a step out. But then going back in, right? So we're not just, let's say, I'm white knuckling it, I'm just going into it, but just to sit in there with, like, curiosity. Because if we can be curious, compassion can follow pretty quickly. Now, usually join together.
Yeah, I like how you said that. Yeah. And you kind of already answered my follow-up question, which was kind of like, how do we, when we do go inward and it's uncomfortable and, you know, maybe that trauma comes up or we get anxious or depressed, those types of things. Yep. It sounds like there's a level of awareness, that just self-awareness, that needs to be had, where we can say, okay, this is feeling like too much right now. I'm just gonna, you know, that was good for today.
Yeah, and give yourself permission, right? Yeah. Permission is huge. Right? Yep. Okay, I've met my quota for today. That's great. Good fucking job. Yeah. Right. Celebrate yourself, because it creates like a positive feedback loop. And as well, like, big fan of breath work. Like, breath work. You know, I mean, it's had a journey. Yeah. I remember growing up. There was a therapist at school, and she used to say, just take like really, really kind of like slow, patronizing voice. So I just take 10 deep breaths, Joe. Think you're on a beach. I was like, what the fuck? What is this? Yeah. Then for years I was like, breath work sucks. And then I engaged in it in a way with someone who was like trained in it. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit. Yeah. Right? If you can regulate the body, you can regulate the mind. Yeah. And so I'd always, after the first session, I send up follow-up emails. First one is always the breath. Yeah. Like values in the breath. And because it gives us a sense of like agency within our bodies, if we can actually work to calm the nervous system down. Right? All of a sudden we can go in there, engage in the breath work. We can actually slow shit down in there. It creates that space. Right? And all of a sudden it grows our tolerance to be within the body, be with our emotions, like all of them. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I'm curious if you have like a personal example of a time where, you know, maybe you were struggling to go inward, but then you found, or you worked through it, or like, do you have anything that jumps out in mind?
Yeah, it's a few. So I mean, I am an individual who experiences like anxiety. I've experienced depression. I've navigated like suicide ideation as well. Okay to talk about all of that. So there's been times where it's just been like really fucking hard. And engaging in like the breath work allowed me to just be in that moment, right? And just to kind of ride it out a little bit, just to say I'm here right now, and I'm creating some space for those emotions, because once we're able to create space for emotions, we can actually have a relationship with them. Yeah. And I think that's a huge part of any work like that we should do within ourselves, is to create a relationship with our emotions. A lot of times, say someone comes in with, say, anxiety, I'm like, how do you feel towards your anxiety? And they're like, I fucking hate it. I'm like, I understand that, but here's the first problem. Because if we aren't having a relationship with our emotions, like on that internal level, anytime we feel them, we're going to try and get away from them. And we're going to try and just push them away, distract ourselves, repress them. But unfortunately, like wherever we go, our emotions will follow us. Yeah. And usually if we push them away, when we are in a vulnerable state, those like emotions that have been like kind of starved for like attention are like, okay, Joe's vulnerable now, let's go fucking jump him. Yeah. And then you get like flooded. Yeah. And so this is a practice, this is a skill. So when like to get to know our emotions, like almost like externalizing them. So if anxiety is present within me or I'm feeling it, I'm like, okay, obviously you have something to say here. So come on, like sit on the couch with me. What have you got to say? Like I'm creating that space for you. Yeah. And then afterwards you thank it. Like, we appreciate you showing up. I'm going to go take it this way. And in that, there's a relationship building of emotions. Because what you're doing is you're trusting that your anxiety, for instance, is not going to come flood you. And then your anxiety is trusting that you're able to actually deal with whatever anxiety is saying that you can't deal with.
Yeah, it's like it almost comes to mind as like your emotions can be like bullies. Right? And it's almost like if you push them back, like they're just going to keep pushing you back. But if you like give them space to just be and like have compassion for them and those types of things, a lot of times you're not giving them what they need. like I think of anxiety that way for myself too. I'll start to have like anxious thoughts. Like even just the thought of calling it out and being like, oh, that's just anxiety just trying to latch onto this thought right now. It's like it sees an opening and it's just trying to latch on. It's like just even sometimes just recognizing that and calling it out kind of puts it at bay a little bit. It's like, you kind of take the power away a little bit, but then allow it to be there.
Yeah, and I think we fall into a pattern of categorizing emotions, good versus bad.
Yeah.
But there's no such thing as bad emotions. They're just emotions.
Yeah.
Right? So all of a sudden, we take those qualifiers away. We can attach new meaning to anxiety. Right? So, or like anger, or depression, whatever it is. Right? They're just emotions. And if emotions weren't meant to exist, they wouldn't. So they're there to be felt. They're there to cultivate this like relationship with them.
Yeah.
Right? And curiosity and compassion. Right?
Yeah.
It's easier to experience your emotions when you can feel some compassion towards them.
Yeah. And is that the same for like more extreme emotions, like you mentioned, even like suicidal ideations, and I would even like say like even like panic attacks and like those types of things where it really does start to feel like it is controlling you now, and it's like it's almost become like this storm that's you're losing the battle almost. How does somebody maybe start to, in that moment, start to create like that meaning or
I think when it comes to like say suicide ideation, and if someone is really struggling with it, I'd say you need to go and seek out like professional help. Right? If it's like seeking therapy, calling 911, like if in those moments when like you are say losing the battle, you need to kind of ensure safety. Same with panic attacks as well, right? They're just can be so overwhelming and like debilitating. Finding like those tools just to kind of create that space, right? Just to maybe slow it down a little bit can be really helpful. But if it becomes like this constant thing where we are just struggling to manage with it, like it's so important then to reach out and like get appropriate help with the appropriate services. That can be like say 911, or even if it's like going to the family doctor. Like if you're experiencing those really, really strong emotions on that level for long periods, it's first of all, it's really fucking hard and scary, but it's also really important to seek other like external help for that as well, right? Just because if we're constantly sitting in thoughts of suicide over and over and over again, that can be really you're in dangerous territories there.
Yeah, I know, and it's such a delicate topic for so many reasons as well, right? So I appreciate you like navigating that with me there.
And
I think it's important, right? Because sure. I think it's one of those things that like it is delicate, but there's a lot of shame attached to it for a lot of people too, where they're like, I don't know what people will think if they know that I've had these kinds of thoughts and stuff. And like really like it's kind of normal to a certain degree to have those, like to have thoughts that come up. But like you said, you need to have like that self-awareness as well with that of like, okay, is this actually dangerous for me now? And do I like, what level of help do I need with this? Yeah,
I think, if it's so pervasive, we need to take those extra steps. But like having like thoughts of suicide ideation, I would say it's not uncommon for people to experience them in like fleeting moments. And then for mine, it was, I think I've been in Canada for a while, and I mean, kind of dotting around, and I was just asking the questions like, why? What am I doing here? My first round to apply for PR had been rejected through a clerical error, so I was like, I felt I was completely like destabilized, and so I sat with that, and I was like, I got into that like, why am I experiencing this? What's going on for me? And I came to the conclusion that I was not fully in my life. I had one foot in, one foot out. So all my kind of like obligations and stuff was all provisional. Essentially, I was not really committed to anything. Like I'd just been like dotting around, traveling like a year here, and then no real plans. And then so I realized that I had a choice to make at this point. I was like, okay, like I'm I'm going to choose to like be in my life at this point. So the escape hatch got closed. I was like, okay, I'm on the field right now. I'm going to play. And that was a big shift for me. Like, it was like a transformative shift to say, okay, I'm like this preciousness of life exists now. So how do I want to play this? How do I want to engage in this? And it was scary to like close that little hatch and say, okay, like I'm doing this now. But since then, like this groundedness came on, like the sense of purpose, meaning changed for me around how I wanted to operate. And yeah, like was really helpful. Scary as fuck. Like in that place of, okay, now I'm here. But yeah, like with a lot of therapy on my own journey, like I was able to find that sense of groundedness again, and like find that stability and crack on.
Yeah. Purpose is just so powerful, right? Like that's what kept coming to mind when you were talking there. It's just a level of purpose was missing, and then you made the decision to go like, no, okay, I'm gonna live for something here. Like, this is my purpose. I had somebody on the show a while back. His name is Kevin Hines, and he was a suicide survivor. Like, he tried to kill himself jumping off the bridge, survived, but he now spends his life like sharing his story about how the moment he jumped off that bridge, he like knew he made a mistake. He's like, nobody will ever know, is one of the things that he would say was, nobody will ever know that I didn't want to do this. Right. And so now he kind of shares that story and helps people, but he's got this like powerful purpose. I often think about that, just in times even when I'm just feeling like a little bit down, where I'm like, okay, like, what's my purpose right now? Like, damn, have I figured that out? Have I taken the time to align these things? And so, yeah. Yeah,
and I think reaching out to people who might be a little further on in their journey can be incredibly anchoring. Right? So when we're feeling that stuckness, like, we can speak to those people who we look up to as role models, like in our like friends, family, career, and just reach out to them and like cultivate those relationships.
Yeah.
Because that can be really helpful in like just causing a bit of movement.
Yeah.
Right. And that can help with the like getting ourselves unstuck.
Yeah. I love it. Again, I appreciate you kind of diving into that a little bit as well. It's like I said, it's a delicate topic, but I think it's a helpful one for people.
Oh, for sure.
Maybe somewhat triggering for some people, but no, I do think it's helpful for people to hear other people's experiences, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's again, right, just not saying it was like an easy journey to say, I made this choice.
Yeah.
There was a lot of work that went in, right? Like a lot of therapy with like solid professionals and like strong intentions, like to go within myself and like go to those places. It wasn't just a switch being kind of flicked. Like, there was a choice, but then it was like, okay, now what am I doing with this choice?
Yeah.
Like, there's that sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
To heal.
Yeah. Yeah. An analogy that I would use is like people who want to get in shape, right? Yeah. It's like New Year's comes around, people want to get in shape, and they're like, okay, I'll just start going to the gym.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, that'll do it. It's like you don't realize there's like all these other factors like that are gonna play into it. You're gonna be stressed one day, and you're not gonna want to go. You're gonna be tired. You might have to work late. Like, there's all these different factors that are gonna play into your journey towards whatever that decision that you made. And I think people need to be aware of that, whether it's physical, emotional, mental. Like, it's gonna be a journey. It's gonna fucking suck sometimes.
Oh yeah.
But like, if you stay committed to it, then like you will find your path, right?
Yeah. It's meeting yourself where you're at as well. Like, some days you're just like, nope, I just want to bury my head in the sand. Okay, if that's where you're at, do that. Right. But then if we find ourselves like doing it over and over and over again, okay, the why comes out. Why am I maintaining this pattern?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's days where we're like, okay, I'm feeling really, really fucking good. I can do all of this stuff today, whatever's on the list of stuff to do.
Yeah.
And some days, okay, I've got all this stuff going on. Didn't sleep well, or had a fight with like a partner. Okay, I'm already compromised. What can I do? Right. And so yeah, it goes back to holding that compassionate space for yourself and meeting yourself where you're at.
Yeah. Just in my mind popped into that that conversation we had around values as well can be super helpful, I think, for people who are trying to navigate those moments where it's like, okay, like reminding yourself of like what's important to me. Like it's easy to get bogged down with the to-do list. It happens to me all the time. I'm like, man, I feel like today was so unproductive. I'm so useless, and like all these thoughts start coming in. But you have to remind yourself, like, hey, like what's truly important to me? Was I a good dad today? Like those types of things, and those things can, I think, help give you grace if you can remind yourself too. Maybe
for sure, yeah. And it's like celebrating yourself. Yeah. Right. Okay. Even though I didn't get everything I wanted to do, but I did this. Right. It's always looking for like scaffolding positivity in ways that we can. Yeah. Rather than just letting like those negative, intrusive thoughts like just overrun us and then start saying that we're a shitty person because we know we're not. Yeah.
Okay, I want to go back to these questions. I'm going to give you a second chance. I'm going to give you a few more words this time. Okay. To go back to these original questions. Excellent. Okay. So I wrote them down because my memory is shit. But okay, so question 1. It doesn't have to be one word answer anymore. Right. You've got 1 year to live. Doctor told you got 1 year left. Yeah. How are you spending that year?
What did I say? Traveling.
Traveling. Yeah, you said traveling.
Yeah, traveling. Traveling is it's fucking great, right? Because you can just put yourself in different situations, different cultures. You can see different things, right? And it's like travel, like to me, I would go into nature. Like I love nature. Like just being in that, like the healing power of it. Exposing myself to different people. Because again, breaking this like these molds and like systems of values that we can operate within, all of a sudden like we're growing like with people. And yeah, it's just, I've always said when I was growing up, I just wanted to see everything, right? And to me, like if I ever lost my vision, that would be the worst thing, because I couldn't see again, and couldn't see the beauty of the earth, which is in pain right now, right? So yeah, traveling is meaning making. It can be like world changing. Yeah,
I really like what you said about like putting yourself around different people as well, because that really, for me, community has always been like a real core value for me growing up in martial arts, especially. Like community was a huge part of just like what made me who I am. And to touch on kind of what we talked about earlier too, that does help you expand your meaning for life. Yeah. Right. Cool. All right. Next question was, how do we save the world? You said less idiots.
Less idiots, yeah. Save the world. Fuck. I don't want to go on a rant here because
got all the time you want.
Save the world. Yeah, I think we need like a deep, compassionate inquiry. We need to we need to pull in different perspectives from different cultures, different generations, rather than this the old white rich man who's running a lot of shit, because clearly it's not working. Everyone has a unique perspective, right? And it's knowing that, like, again, right, change is so important, right? Change is constant. And I'll often find myself, I'll sit in my bathtub and just watch like a space documentary, and I sit and think about change a lot. And I boiled it down to two things, right? Change is either growth or decay, right? And ultimately, the finish line of our existence is that we will die, right? That's an inevitability. No one gets out of this hellscape alive. So we can either choose to grow towards the finish line or decay towards the finish line. It's the same thing, same result. So I think with less idiots, we can grow rather than decay, because if we're looking around right now, there's a lot of decay going on. We're just kind of rinsing and repeating old shit that is keeping us stuck in place. So yeah, just bringing in a multiplicity of perspective can save the world.
I think we often forget that, like, we've been wrong about everything, right? Like, people think that we have it figured out, I think, sometimes. It's like, we've literally been wrong about everything in the history of the world. Like we thought we knew what the stars were.
Yeah.
We were wrong. Like we thought we knew we thought the earth was flat at one point. Like we were wrong.
Yeah.
We thought all these different things and we've always been wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's like that openness and togetherness to come together as a collective, it sounds like, is what you're saying. And like, just like figure this thing out together. Like,
it's theory. That's why I love science. It's all based on theory, and theory's there to be disproven. And once it's disproven, people aren't getting pissy about it. They're like, oh, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah,
we know something new right now. And I always say, I never want to be the smartest person in the room, right? Because then my opportunity to learn has been diminished.
Yeah.
I would never say I have been the smartest person in the room, but like, you have to want to expose yourself to like new ideas, because new ideas is, I mean, like leads to change, leads to liberation.
Yeah.
Whereas if we just get stuck in this like one track rigid mind of this is a fact, well, no. Yeah. Usually facts are opinions.
Yeah.
Right? And opinions are like assholes. Everyone's go on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like I would say too, there's no such thing as being the smartest person in the room. Oh. The person who thinks they're the smartest person in the room is the person who needs to check their ego, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because like you said, everybody has a different perspective. Everybody has a different fact. Mm-hmm. And if we can open our minds up to everybody's perspective a little bit more, maintaining our own boundaries and stuff like that, of course, but like being open to it, I think, super important.
Yeah, curiosity, right? That's how we can save the world. There's the one word, curiosity.
There you go. See, I knew we get some changes. That's why we come back to it. Okay, so next one is, what pain can you live with? Like, or what? Rephrase it a little bit. What pain are you willing to live with?
I'm willing to live with it all, because to experience the vastness of life, you have to experience it all. And so, pain it can be fleeting, right? Because every interaction is fleeting in itself, right? We just constantly live in these moments of time, right? And often like anticipatory, is that the word?
I like it.
We'll go with that.
I like it.
Is often worse than the real thing. So it's we're worried about the pain that we might endure, even when we're not experiencing in that moment, right? So we have the capacity to endure a lot as humans. We have, right? Because we're here. So I think we can sit with all pain. It's hard, it's difficult, but with the right community, right? Structures in place, from like the meso, macro, and micro levels, we can sit with it all. And again, right, not just saying it as like it's an easy thing to do it. Again, it's part of that journey to go to those deeper waters, but we do have the capacity to endure the pain of life.
Yeah, not an easy thing, but an important thing, right? Yeah. Okay, last question, the big one. What is the meaning of life? No cliche answers allowed.
No cliche answers. Okay. Engagement, I said. We have to engage in our lives. Because that's everything, right? If we choose to bury our head in the sand, that's still, we're engaging in something. So when it goes down to values, it goes down to purpose, it goes down to meaning, right? Like, it's how we're engaging with that, how we're experiencing it. Who are we aligning ourselves with in terms of like community, relationships, work? That's all engagement. I think as well, meaning of life is just to really get to know you in such a curious and compassionate way. And there's multiple ways to do that, through therapy, through exercise, through pain, through like psychedelics. I think we have a responsibility to engage in our lives. And again, right, I'm saying this as a very privileged white man. Like, I've had the opportunity to engage in my life because I haven't experienced depression before. I haven't had to run through like a hill of bullets. So that's just my own subjective answer of it, because I know it's so different, and so many other people have experienced atrocities that I just haven't.
Yeah. It reminds me what you just said of the first time that I went to therapy, and I'm sitting there and I'm like filling out this form, right? and at the time I was going just because I felt like it'd probably be helpful. Like I was like, I suggest it to other people. Like it's probably, I knew I had like stress and some anxiety and stuff like that. But going through this checklist, I'm like, have you experienced this and this and this trauma? I'm like, no. Have you been abused like sexually? No. Have you this? No. And I remember they're like, so like, what brings you in today? Like, what made you want to come? And I was like, honestly, like after filling out that form, I feel like really freaking guilty. I'm like, there's people clearly who need this way more than I do. But then I had to kind of come back a little bit to the compassion of like, yeah, but everybody deserves to be on this journey, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And therapy's not just about crisis. It can be, for sure. It can be about growth. It can be about maintenance. And yeah, it's always interesting when you get the checklist, because all of a sudden it's like, I'm categorizing my entire being into these boxes, which is I think is just an injustice to like you as like a living entity. And so like in my work, it's the first session is, I said, there's no expectations. We're actually just two people having a conversation, just getting to know one another. And then some people love that, and some people like that more kind of structured approach, and that's great as well.
Exactly.
Like, there's no wrong way to do therapy.
Right,
as a client.
Awesome. Well, I love it. I love, like I said at the beginning, you're real. Like you can sense that. I know that comes across to people who are watching this too. And yeah, I just want to thank you for coming on the show, for opening up, for having this conversation. And it was fun. Hope
that was great.
Well,
thanks a lot, mate.
You're welcome. And thanks to everybody else for listening and watching. See you in the next episode.